But I'm interested in John Jones versus Stipe.
Yeah.
Especially if Stipe's healthy. I'm very interested in that.
Can I in no way wish to be disrespectful, but just a layman perspective, a lot of people I have heard saying Stipe is too old now.
We don't know. He hasn't fought since he got knocked out by Francis, and Francis looked unbelievable in that fight. He was patient and calculated, and his power is just so extraordinary that if he just catches you a couple of times, Francis hits so hard. And so him knocking out Stipe was not as much as like Stipe doesn't have it anymore, was that Francis is that good, that big, that scary, a natural 265-pound knockout machine.
Yeah, but John Jones, man, come on.
Yeah, John Jones is the highest fight IQ of all time next to Mighty Mouse. Like he finds a way to win, and he's an unbelievable grappler. That's why that would be such a good fight. His super high fight IQ, use of distance better than anybody, and then this ability to know how to win. And can he win versus that guy? Because if you get clipped once, just once, what he did to Cain Velasquez, just inside, caught him with an uppercut. You see Cain's just lights go out. Like Cain can take a shot, man. That guy's his power is different. It's just extraordinary.
But I think you hit the nail on the head. He knows how to win, and you see it with all great athletes.
Yep.
And teams that even if they're not doing well, even though they're not fighting well, if they're not playing well, they have that extra gear that they can go into. And then suddenly you go, how did he do that? How did they do that? They were on the ropes.
Makes people different. And it probably drives you crazy. They say Michael Jordan was out of his fucking mind when he was at his best. It's of course. It's just.
But Jones has looked. I wouldn't say beatable, but there are a couple of guys that pushed him. Two or three.
It's mostly
Reyes.
he was playing with his food. It's mostly John was bored. He was so dominant that he would not train. When he fought Alexander Gustafsson, they said he barely trained at all and still beat him in the stretch. And then the rematch wanted to prove a point. So trained really hard and beat the shit out of Gustafsson. With John, it's a lot of it is he's so much better than everybody else. Like when he's really threatened, like with Cormier, then you see how good he really is. Like when he knocked out Cormier with that head kick, and that's when you see how good he is, when he's pushed.
Yeah.
When you see John Jones with a real challenge in front of him. And hopefully that's what the John Jones we'll see with Stipe.
Yeah, let's hope Stipe pushes him.
John Jones, that's the boogeyman. Like John Jones is the boogeyman. And maybe he hasn't died, but he's probably he's probably knocked on the door a couple of times like, what's going on, Death? You in there? John Jones has had some trials and tribulations, but the skill set and the ability to push deep into rounds is nuts. Like John when he fought Gustafsson, he had almost no training camp. They said he barely showed up. Like, I talked to Jackson about it, and Greg Jackson was telling me, he's like, he didn't even train for that fight.
Wow.
He didn't even train. And then he pulled that fight off in the 4th and 5th rounds. That's when he really turned it up. So you're talking about a guy who hasn't even been training. And then you saw the real John Jones in the second fight. That's motivated John Jones. Who's like, I'm going to show you what the fuck is really up. And then he just beats the shit out of Gustafsson in the second fight.
And I wonder if it's going to get him to that point, all this talking from Aspinall, so they get him motivated, right? Or is he going to be at a point like, let me be done with Stipe and be done with it? But I don't want a heavyweight motivated John Jones if I'm on the other side. Like,
yeah.
The way he just pulled Gon down so easily and choked him out, I was like, bro.
Yeah.
And then Gon looks good his last 2 fights.
But again, you're saying the right thing. Like, what is it like in the 5th round with John Jones? Because if you can't steamroll John Jones and he starts side kicking your fucking kneecaps,
there's nobody better with distance than John.
The best.
So in the MMA, in the history of the MMA, is there someone that is akin to Messi in terms of like a Michael Jordan or a Messi in the MMA?
There's a few. There's a few that are in that conversation. I think the number one consensus greatest of all time is John Jones. Because John Jones just went up and easily won the heavyweight title with a first round submission. Easily. Just took the guy down, strangled him quick. And the way he did it was like so extraordinary. His control of distance, his management of the space, like the way he set it up. It's really tough to argue that he's not the greatest of all time. Undefeated as a light heavyweight, had one defeat that was a disqualification that's 100% bullshit. He was on top of this guy, smashing him. But they said that he did 12 to 6 elbows, which are the dumbest ever rule in MMA. And that's the only time he ever lost. He got disqualified. It's the only time he ever lost. Other than that, like he's like at certain point in times in his career, he was like playing with his food. Like, he let fights go on too long, where he's like almost disinterested and engaged. Like, he wanted to try standing up with guys who were supposedly great strikers. Just decided not to try to take people down. Just try to do whatever the fuck he wanted to do, because he's so much better than everybody. He was getting bored. Wow. And then when he has like big challenges, like this second Daniel Cormier fight, he stopped Cormier with a head kick. Like, jeez, he's so fucking good. I mean, he's beaten so many people, and the way he beat him. He fought Lyoto Machida, and it's one of the most cold-blooded finishes in the history of the sport. He has Machida, and he grabs him at the cage, presses him against the cage, and gets him in this perfect power guillotine, puts him to sleep, and then drops him and walks away. That's the greatest of all time. And when he's challenged, that's when, like I said, the second Daniel Cormier fight, there was so much bad blood between them. When he's challenged, really challenged, that's when you see how good he really is. Right. The problem is he's so much better than almost everybody that ever has done the sport, that he, at certain times, just got too distracted, partying a lot, fucking off a lot. John is what I would describe is, there's human beings that have different temperament and different minds and different mentality and a ruthless competitive drive that's almost terrifying to the ordinary person. That's John Jones. John Jones is a bad guy who's trying to be a good guy. Right. But that guy, if we were living 1,000 years ago, he would be on a horse with the biggest battle axe, waiting in the back, hacking heads off, and everybody would be running. And those people have always existed. Right. These dominators have always existed. Yeah. But John is like a genuinely sensitive, intelligent guy who's trying to do the right thing. Right. But he's a fucking conqueror. If you wanted to like really think about like who's the most complete fighter, you say like Max Holloway, Ilia Topuria, but Islam Makhachev, you got to put at the top of the heap. They're the most complete. He can KO you with a head kick. Well, just like John Jones, if John Jones is active. That's what I was saying.
Let's not forget the one true God.
Yeah,
John
if he's
Jones,
active.
That's my boy.
The problem with John is...
This is the most dangerous man who've ever lived.
Unfortunately, that shoulder injury, and then the uncertainty about moving up into heavyweight. Like, how's he going to deal with guys like Francis? Which was always the big fight. That was the big fight.
That was the fight that slipped between our fingers. It was the Fedor, Brock Lesnar fight all over again. That was the big one that slipped through our fingers.
That was the fight. Because, the question is, would Francis be able to keep John off of him?
Exactly.
And would John be able to avoid the big strike standing?
Exactly.
There's a difference in size that's pretty significant. Even when John was getting big, it's a different kind of big. It's big. Like the 265 that Francis carries around, that's a natural lean 265.
Yeah, it's like it's a cobalt mining or something?
No, sand mines.
Sand mines, yeah. That's a different...
When he was a child.
That's a different guy.
That dude's power is extraordinary.
That's a different guy.
Especially with them little gloves on, you cannot get clipped by that guy. So the question is, would John be able to get a hold of Francis? Would Francis be able to keep John off him? If Francis can keep John off him, would Francis be able to stop those leg kicks? Because John side kicks the shit out of people's knees, and it'll scare you because it makes your leg hyperextend. It'll blow your knee out.
Mean.
It's mean.
I loved John Jones when he was mean. Glover Teixeira with that with that overhook. Remember that overhook that he had on the shoulder?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Mean. Elbows.
How about Thiago? Thiago had to get 2 knee surgeries. Both knees.
Guillotine with Machida. As soon as he goes out.
Put him to sleep. Just dropped him. Yeah. Well, his run in the light heavyweight division was unprecedented.
Nothing like it.
Yeah.
Literally created for human combat. Yeah. His body looked insane. Small torso with limbs coming out. It looked insane. If you saw his silhouette, looks insane.
Right, and how small his calves are. Yeah,
little tiny.
But yet, tremendous strength.
And strong.
And smart. And the best guy ever at utilizing distance. Strong mentally for sure.
Mentally. Yeah. And clever.
Yeah, we just have to see him back. John Jones versus Stipe, Madison Square Garden, November.
Also, no disrespect to Stipe, but I don't want to see that fight that badly as I want to see,
I feel like you got to give Stipe one more shot.
Okay.
I feel like the guy's been strung around for this long. If you want to respect the history and the lineage of the UFC heavyweight
what?
championship.
You're right.
He's the most accomplished UFC heavyweight of all time.
You're
he
very
defended
right.
the title more than anybody. And, he stopped Daniel Cormier. He's a legit killer. He stopped a lot of, very, very good people. He stopped Junior Dos
And
Santos.
he also won Francis.
Yeah. He beat Francis the first fight.
And he hurt him
Yeah.
the second time.
Yeah, but
It wasn't
the
this.
second time it was a different Francis. He's
Jesus Christ.
so
One
much.
of the scariest KOs I've ever seen in my life. In the apex.
Yeah. John Jones is the GOAT.
He's the GOAT.
Now it's undeniable.
It's undeniable.
There was
He-
all this debate until
Yeah.
he submitted Cyril Gane and became the heavyweight champion. No one can fuck with that.
Smashed him, bro.
Smashed
and
him.
Cyril looked kind of unbeatable up until the Francis fight.
Well, the Francis fight exposed one aspect of his game
Sure.
that you're never going to beat John in, and that's the wrestling.
Yeah.
And then everybody said, well, he didn't know that Francis was going to wrestle him. Given. Francis is not the caliber wrestler or even in the realm of John Jones.
No doubt.
John Jones been wrestling since he was 12 years old. He took down Daniel Cormier, who's an Olympic level
Yep.
wrestler.
Yep.
There is not a guy in the world that can say that you could start wrestling at 29 years old. I mean, you'd have to be the freakiest of freak athletes to be able to compete with that guy to start wrestling when Cyril Gane started wrestling.
Right.
The gap is just too wide to cross.
Right. So I think what I was thinking is, and when I bring up John Jones, is I remember the first John Jones fight I watched was when he got DQ'd against Matt Hamill
Okay.
from the 12-6
Yeah,
elbows.
yeah.
Right. That was my first experience with him. The next thing I feel like I remember, and I may have seen some of his fights in between then, but is when he beat up this guy that was trying to rob this lady the night of a
That
fight.
was the day he fought for the title.
Right.
The day he fought for the title, he chased down a guy who robbed
Yeah.
someone and tackled him and held him until the cops came.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then,
And then
went
went-
and fought Shogun and became the youngest ever UFC champion.
Yep. So here's what I'm getting at is and this is going to be I'm interested in your take on this because I watched it happen with John Jones and I feel like I watched it happen with Kamaru as well, where it was John and Kamaru as they came up, right? It's John does this thing where he stops this robber and he wins the belt. He beats Shogun, who is this kind of him and Lyoto were these kind of unfigure-outable guys to me as a fan at that time, right? Guys how do you beat Lyoto Machida? You can't, because you can't even touch the guy, right? At that time. And they were inherently these good guys that everybody was rooting for.
Mm-hmm.
And then both of them became these epically long-range champions that then became sort of villains.
Kamaru was never a villain.
I feel like he is.
Really?
To
How
me
so?
as a fan, again, who doesn't know anything, and maybe it's it comes back to maybe the celebrity ego thing, to the camera as a fan. Again, I've never met the guy. He's probably great. But just as a casual watcher, I went from going, I'm rooting for this guy, to then it be the way he talks about himself. And I feel like John Jones was the same way to me, is they became this really and then John got in all this kind of turmoil-y stuff.
Well, I don't think you can compare the two. And here's two reasons why. One, have you ever seen Kamaru talk? You ever seen Kamaru on my podcast?
Mm-mm.
He's one of the nicest, most down-to-earth, friendly, smiley, fun guys. There's what you're seeing is Kamaru, the
dog.
destroyer.
The dog,
The
dude.
dog
Right.
is ready to go to
100%.
war. That's the difference. And
that's what
he's-
I was trying to ask.
He's
Is
signaling to
Sure.
all the other people,
Sure.
I'm going to smash you.
right.
That's what he's signaling.
And that's what I think I was asking is that all just perceived by me, or is that
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or is
that's
that-
part of the fun of being a fan.
Sure.
Deciding what
Sure.
you like and what you don't like, and personalities that you root for and personalities you root against. And sometimes you root against a guy and he wins you over because he's so goddamn good. You're like, I wanted that motherfucker to lose, but he's the fucking greatest.
Yeah.
John is very different than Kamaru. John is what I would describe is there's human beings that have different temperament and different minds and different mentality and a ruthless competitive drive that's almost terrifying to the ordinary person. That's John Jones. John Jones is a bad guy who's trying to be a good guy. But that guy, if we were living 1,000 years ago, he would be on a horse with the biggest battle axe, waiting in the back, hacking heads off, and everybody would be running. And those people have always existed. These dominators have always existed. But John is like a genuinely sensitive, intelligent guy who's trying to do the right thing. But he's a fucking conqueror. He's a fucking conqueror. That's the thing that's inside of him that leads him to be the GOAT. And without that, you don't get there. You don't get that. You don't get a Mike Tyson without that. You don't get a Muhammad Ali without that. You don't get a Marvin Hagler without that. You don't get that. That there's a thing inside some people that is a driving force that allows them to overcome the greatest around them. It's a Michael Jordan. It's
100%.
There's a thing, man.
Tom Brady.
And those motherfuckers are hated. They're always hated.
For sure.
Because you have to hate them because you can't beat them.
It's the 260-inch deer, dude. Because me and my buddies were talking, it's like, they're like, man, that's not the deer of a lifetime. That's the deer of 10 lifetimes.
Yes. Most people will never see that.
Right.
But it's even more than that because you can just accidentally stumble across the deer of a lifetime. Mm-hmm. You can't accidentally beat John Jones. There's a thing about...
So he's GOAT over Khabib.
He's GOAT over everybody. Now
Khabib's too?
Yeah, Khabib is in the conversation, but Mighty Mouse is in that conversation too. Mighty Mouse, to me, if you want to look at like a technical expression of the greatness of martial arts, he's as good as anybody's ever done it. When Mighty Mouse was the flyweight champion. And the only problem is, besides Cejudo and a couple other guys like Benavidez, and he was not dealing with guys that are of the caliber of the guys that John Jones was facing. John Jones was facing Gustafsson, Glover Teixeira. He was facing Daniel Cormier. He was facing the elite of the elite, and he never fucking lost, even when he was doing coke and he wasn't even training. Right. That's how goddamn good John Jones is.
Right.
And when John Jones talks about fights, though, when I had him on the podcast, one of the things that he talked about, some people don't really watch tape, or they only watch a little bit. They let their coaches do the work. John Jones studies everyone. He studies their tendencies. He gets in his mind how when you throw that left kick, you make this little step with your right foot. You might do this thing when you shoot for a takedown, where you keep your you keep your head on one side every time. You might do this thing where when someone throws a right hand, you always lean to the left. You might do and John Jones picked up that tendency, and that's how he knocked out Daniel Cormier. He knew Daniel Cormier has a tendency to duck towards his right side because he goes for that single on the left leg, and John caught him with the perfect head kick. But it wasn't by an accident. He set that up. He set it up just like Leon Edwards set up that head kick on Kamaru. There's a beauty to that. That's just, man, in the middle of chaos and anxiety and fear and the fucking fog of war, you figure out a way to connect with this thing that you saw in tape and in training and in preparation. Right. So it's with John, it's not an accident that he's the GOAT. Even with his lack of training, even with the it's just like he's so fucking talented that he almost needs another John Jones to make him compete the way make him train the way a lot of these other guys do. Like, he's so good, he can beat those guys without being challenged by someone like him.
Right.
Because John Jones has never faced a John Jones.